Hi everybody, this is Fridge. So as we're all aware, this last round of hard mode was kicked up a few notches. This is culminating two final bosses that rival, and in Revan's case, in my opinion, surpass the final bosses of the previous tiers of Nightmare. With our kill this week, only 2 guilds have cleared Hard Mode Revan since he was brought up to his intended highest difficulty on the 13th of January. So let's talk about what this does for the game and why it makes me worried. Typically when players talk about tuning, we approach it from a couple of perspectives. Our own and what we guess is the developer's intentions. For the purposes of this video, I'll do my best to approach this issue with both of these perspectives in mind. So first let's talk about the clearance rate for the mid-tier difficulty being as low as it is. As a player, I really don't think it makes sense to be okay with this for hard mode. It's more consistent with what I'd expect out of Nightmare. Frankly, if Revan goes unchanged, I'll be very, very surprised if 10 or even 5 guilds clear Hard Mode Temple before Nightmare is released. Assuming Nightmare is released around May. The reason I see a problem with this as a player is because we all know Nightmare is coming, and honestly, other than a standard damage increase, I don't see a meaningful way to make the hardest phase of Revan harder without it approaching the maximum of what can reasonably be expected from an operations group. For those who don't know, in the final Machine Core burn on Hard Mode Revan, the central beam performs a knockback and pull-in alternately every 15 seconds. Additionally, while Revan is watching you destroy the machine, he summons 4 unstable aberrations. These are large purple circles summoned in a semi-random spot around the ring that the group stands on, and one by one they activate and then explode. When they explode, they deal about 6,000 damage if you're looking at them. If you're not looking at them, they hit you with a strong knockback, likely killing you by forcing you off the stage. This backstab, as near as anybody can tell, is about 270 of the total 360 degrees that you can face. Much like player backstabs, which can be performed on a target's side. Like, I don't know if anybody has PvP'd on an operative or an assassin, but anything that requires you to stand behind the target will also work if you're standing to their side. And the aberrations work the same way. This necessitates that the entire raid face each aberration in the order in which they explode. In addition, if somebody performs a heal or attacks the core and it turns their character, the game will consider them turned for that split second, regardless of them holding down the right mouse button and focusing on the aberration. This forces most people to keep their hands off their keybinds, despite being in a burn phase. Keep in mind that during or shortly before the aberration explosions, the center will perform a pull-in. The net result of all this is the biggest personal responsibility check in an operation to date, because the raid can't afford to lose members other than tanks for fear of failing the DPS check. That said, I don't know how to make that phase harder for Nightmare without making it nearly impossible. They could add 1 or more aberrations to the rotation, increasing the damage the group takes and forcing them to do even less DPS for fear of getting knocked off. They could force the in and out heartbeat mechanic to also ignore ballistic immunity, which the aberrations do right now. There's very little else I can think of in terms of a new mechanic that wouldn't just overwhelm players' attentions in that already high-stress situation and be insurmountable. The problem is, if there's not enough a jump in difficulty between Hard and Nightmare, then some people will be upset. So, what are they going to do? A couple of solutions immediately spring to mind. They could nerf Revan's final phase in hard mode right now, or at least sometime before Nightmare, and then bump it up back to that level, perhaps with a few tweaks when Nightmare Temple releases. This would preserve, albeit artificially, the expected difficulty gap between Hard and Nightmare, and happens to be my preferred solution, as it'll no doubt increase the clearance rate of the ops. Another solution is they do nothing with hard mode and either buff the other phases of the fight, which have more wiggle room as far as distance from the skill ceiling goes, and that's about it. I mean, they leave the final phase the way it is. The reason I'm skeptical they won't go for a buff to the final phase for Nightmare is that it's already proving itself to have an exceptionally low clearance rate. Nightmare is, yes, supposed to have that low clearance rate, but I have my doubts that the target number of guilds the devs expect to be able to clear it should be able to be counted on one hand. The other way to go about it is to just have a smaller difficulty gap between Hard and Nightmare, which I've already said will upset a number of people since, given all our practice, that'll mean those who have had success in hard mode will find it quickly again in Nightmare. What I expect will happen is Bioware will just nerf Revan's final phase for hard mode. I'd nerf it by making the backstab more forgiving. Like, there's no reason it should be able to sidestab you, as I said. It should probably be about 180 degrees at most. If your back is facing it, it should hit you. That'll give a lot of groups more wiggle room to squeeze in damage and healing, which will help them pass the DPS check. given that when Nightmare eventually releases, the backstab will probably, or whatever nerf they apply will probably be lifted, and it'll be brought up to the level it's at right now. Maybe with some minor tweaks, but I hope nothing too game-changing. As I said, it is very close to the limit of what I could expect the Star Wars population to be able to do and still succeed. Yes, Bioware will probably upset a lot of people who have already cleared it, but that's a very small number of people right now. And since there's not that many of us, frankly, it's a lot better to cater to the larger audience than the smaller one. You can just ask WildStar how catering to the hardcore worked out for them. In the future, if they want to avoid this particular dilemma, they should bring hard mode down a bit so that they have more room for heftier busts by the time Nightmare rolls around. So, I mean, that's about all I have to say about that. If you like blogs like this, please like and subscribe. Leave a comment if you have any questions or comments. But other than that, follow me at FridgeMM on Twitter. And that's it. See you guys next time.